Welcome back to Pat Psychology Masters. It's been 2 weeks since my last video. Really sorry I didn't get to post a video last weekend. Kind of swamped under at the moment with different assignments, but this video is just so interesting that I can't not record it and share it with you guys at home. So, as promised in my last video, I'm going to be talking about a paper for false memory generation during Ireland's abortion referendum. This study was conducted by Gillian Murphy and her colleagues. Gillian Murphy is an Irish researcher from the University College Cork, and this is an incredibly interesting study. It taught me numerous things about the human condition which I had not known previously. Some things I may have suspected, but some things I didn't know for sure. So this study is just brilliant for so many different reasons, and I'm going to touch on it now. And I'm going to provide links to news articles about the study if you want to learn further. And I'd highly recommend you look up the original paper because it's just incredible. So Gillian went into this study with 3 separate hypotheses. Those were, number 1, that people would be more likely to report false memories for things that were incongruent to their beliefs. So for instance, a yes voter in the abortion referendum will be more likely to remember a fake news story about the No campaign, and vice versa. A no voter will be more likely to remember a fake news story about the Yes campaign. The second hypothesis was that participants of lower cognitive ability will be more likely to remember something that didn't happen, remember a fake news story. And their third and final hypothesis was that if people were given a fake news warning, they would be more likely to identify a fake news source. So all of these hypotheses were confirmed, and they were confirmed in quite interesting ways, which I'll explore now. So taken first, people are more likely to remember a fake news story that is incongruent to their beliefs. So taking the yes vote, for example, if they are presented with a fake news story, in the case of this study, the fake news story of interest was 500,000 posters for the No campaign had to be destroyed after it was learned that they were illegally paid for using foreign money. Okay? That didn't happen. But it was presented in a format to the participants like it was a news story. And then they were asked, do you remember this event happening? Do you not remember but believe that it happened? Or do you just not remember it? As much as 54% of people claim to either remember or believe that it happened. It didn't. And the similar numbers of people from the no side of the debate remembered the exact same fake story about the Yes campaign. So some people were posed with the fake news story that 500,000 posters for the Yes campaign had to be destroyed because they were found to have been illegally funded using foreign money. This is untrue. So they were able to confirm their first hypothesis, which I think is just so interesting. Secondly, they predicted that cognitive ability would predict how likely someone would be to generate a false memory. So they measured cognitive ability using a task called the word sum task. And the word sum task is basically a word association test where you're given 10 words and you have to associate each word with a corresponding synonym. Now, interestingly, I think this test is quite controversial as a measure of cognitive ability because low cognitive ability was defined as getting 7 answers correct or less, and high cognitive ability was counted as getting over 7 answers correct. There's only 10 questions, so it's quite a black and white criterion. You know, if you got 6, well then you're low cognitive ability. And if you got 8, well then you're high cognitive ability. There's no real grey area there. So I thought that was controversial. But results on this test were able to predict whether or not somebody would be more or less likely to generate a false memory. So they were able to confirm the hypothesis with that task, which is interesting. Now, perhaps a fairer way of describing that phenomenon isn't that lower or higher cognitive ability predicts this phenomenon, but perhaps that differences in verbal ability or differences in vocabulary are able to predict that. But that's just aside, and we do know that cognitive ability is related to how good our vocabulary is and how well we use language. The third hypothesis was that if a fake news warning was given to participants, so if the participants were told, look, it's very, very likely that some of the news stories you were presented with in this experiment were fake, what they wanted to see was if the person would be able to identify the fake news story correctly. And people were found that they were more likely to identify the fake news story, but not always. That wasn't always the case. So the take-home message there, that despite the fact that participants knew that it's very possible that one of the stories they're exposed to was fake, they still struggled to identify the fake news story. And this is kind of applicable to everyday life. You know, we've all heard of fake news at this stage, and yet we're still susceptible to believing it's true. So really question your memory. Do you really remember something, or did your mind generate a memory that isn't actually convergent on what happened? Something I thought was very interesting about this study was that they distinguished between the belief of an event happening and the memory of it happening. And the results were so robust that the statistical significance of the effects of a greater likelihood of remembering politically incongruent news stories was still significant even when the belief data was put aside. So just when the memory data was taken, it was still shown that people are more likely to generate false memories for a fake news story if that fake news story is incongruent to their beliefs. So when you think of the things that you believe to be true or remember to be true, ask yourself, am I remembering this because it's confirming of my own ideologies, because it aligns well with what I think about the world? Or am I remembering this because this is actually the way the world is? I'm only skimming the surface in this study. It is so profoundly interesting. I'd highly recommend you check it out. But that's all I have time for the moment. I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button and check me out on Instagram @PatPsychologyMasters. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I hope we did a good job of explaining the study. If there's anything you're unsure of, please let me know and I'll try and clarify. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.